And with that, seeing that it's now 10:01, I'll call the meeting, today's meeting of the Audit Committee, the Thursday, June 9th meeting of the Audit Committee to order. I'd like to make a few announcements. First, this is Claudia Gualtieri, Chair of the Audit Committee. We'll request, as is typical, that when people speak, that every time that they speak, they first introduce themselves for purposes of record keeping and ease of following the conversation. I'll also note that we do have some action items that will require roll call votes today. And as was previously announced, today's meeting is being recorded. So first order of business, I'd like to request that a roll call for attendance be taken to confirm that we do have a quorum.
Claudia Gualtieri.
Here.
Brian Ritter.
Here.
Cece Woods.
Here.
Matthew Brockman. Caroline Zambetti on behalf of DMS Commissioner Nancy Navarrete.
Here.
Good morning. We do have a quorum.
Morning.
Great, thank you, and welcome, Carlene. I think this is your first meeting of the Audit Committee. We appreciate your designation and your involvement in this important work that we'll be doing together.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Excellent. I would also like to introduce and ask for the Access Health Connecticut members of the staff to please introduce themselves, as well as our special guest today from Clifton, Larson, and Allen. I'll start with our CEO, James. Would you like to kick it off?
Absolutely. Good morning, all. I'm James Michel, the Chief Executive Officer for Access Health Connecticut. Pass it off to Daryl.
Hi, Daryl Jones, Finance Director for Access Health Connecticut.
Hi, Susan Rich-Bai, Director of Legal and Governmental Affairs for Access Health Connecticut.
Great, and our guest from Clifton, Larson, Allen, please. Nicoletta, I think that's you.
Yep, Nicoletta McTighe, Principal with CLA and Auditor for Access Health Connecticut.
Excellent.
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Flint. I'm also from CLA.
Thank you both for joining us today. Our next item of business is a review and approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Everyone should have received a packet in advance of today's meeting that included both the agenda and the minutes from our previous meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes now.
So moved. This is Grant.
Seconded, Cece Woods.
Grant moved and Cece Woods seconded. Any discussion? If not, I would ask for a roll call vote to approve the minutes.
Claudia Gualtieri.
Yes.
Brian Ritter.
Yes.
Cece Woods.
Yes.
Caroline Zambetti.
Abstain.
And Matthew Brockman. Thank you.
So this is Claudia one more time for purposes of turning it over to Daryl and Nicoletta to do the presentation on the audit communication discussion.
Sure. Good morning, Daryl Jones, Access Health Connecticut Finance Director. This morning, I'm going to introduce Nicoletta McTighe from Clifton, Larson, and Allen. She's going to present the upcoming 2022 financial and programmatic audits. So I'll turn it over to you, Nicoletta.
Thank you, Daryl. Nicoletta McTighe with CLA. Martian, are you controlling the? Okay. So this agenda for today's meeting, I'll go over the engagement scope for the 2022 audit, management responsibilities, auditors' responsibilities and independence. I'll go over some other planning matters and communications and communicate to you all the time and the key members of the engagement team. So we are engaged to perform an audit of the financial statements, and as part of the audit financial statements, we are going to give an opinion on the financial statements under auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, standards applicable to financial audits containing government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. New for fiscal year 2022 is that Access Health is subject to federal single audit. So as everybody might be aware, American Health Benefit Exchange State Planning and Establishment Grant was made available to Access Health as of July 2021. And since the expenditures related to that grant are going to be $750,000 or higher, Access Health is subject to federal single audit for the current year. So that will require an addendum to our engagement letter. The original one only refers to the financial statement audits and programmatic audit. But while we had our planning meeting with management, it was determined that Access Health is subject to federal single audit for the current year. And the next one is programmatic audit. Similar to the past, we are going to audit the Access Health compliance with 45 CFR Part 125 as prescribed by Department of Health and Human Services, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Responsibilities of management are to prepare, excuse me, and to present financial statement fairly in accordance with US GAAP, to design and implement and maintain internal controls so the financial statements are free from material misstatements due to either error or fraud. Our responsibilities as auditors are to identify and assess the risk of material misstatements of the financial statements, whether they are due to error or fraud. And based on our risk assessment, we'll design and perform audit procedures and examine on test basis evidence regarding the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. As part of the audit, we are going to obtain an understanding of internal controls relevant to the audit. And based on our understanding of internal controls, we are going to design our audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of internal control. So we get an understanding of it, we design our audit procedures, but we do not give an opinion on internal control. We are responsible to evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies used and reasonableness of a significant accounting estimate by management, as well as to evaluate the overall presentation of the financial statements. As part of our audit, we are going to conclude whether in our judgment there are conditions or events that raise substantial doubt about Access Health Connecticut ability to continue as a going concern for a reasonable period of time. And this is a new requirement this year that you are going to see even in the audit report. Form and express an opinion whether the financial statements are prepared and fairly presented. And just to emphasize the fact that we do not give an absolute assurance about the financial statement, but we are going to provide a reasonable assurance whether or not the financial statements are free of material misstatements. So under the federal single audit, responsibilities are similar. We are going to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether material non-compliance with the applicable compliance requirements occurred. So the program that we are going to test, because it's only one program, has several requirements that we need to go over and make sure that Access Health is in compliance. We are going to test the controls over those compliance requirements to make sure that the controls are designed and they are effective. We are going to consider those internal controls during our testing of compliance requirements. And we are going to issue a report on internal controls over compliance related to the major program that we are going to test. So there are going to be, the federal single audit report is kind of a two-part report. One is a report on compliance with requirements, and the other one is report on internal control over those compliance requirements, in addition to an opinion in relation to the overall financial statements of the amount of the grant that's being presented. Next slide, please. Some other matters that I'd like to emphasize is that we are independent to perform the audit. There are no relationships between any of our representatives and the Access Health that, in our professional opinion, impairs our independence. So the communication between us and you as charged with governance, the audit committee, should be a two-way communication, and that is a very important aspect of doing the audit. We encourage you to provide us with information you consider relevant to the audit, your understanding of the risks of fraud and the controls in place to prevent and detect fraud, and whether or not you are aware of any non-compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, or grant agreements. My presentation today is the first of the two formal communications to you. So one is now that we are starting the audit about audit planning, and the next one is going to be at the conclusion of the audit process when we issue the report and issue another report to those charged with governance. Next slide, please. For the current year, there will be new GASB that will be implemented, which is GASB number 87 leases. As a result of this new GASB, financial statements and notes to the financial statements are going to change. Asset and liability related to lease agreements is going to be reported in the current year. Currently, we've had a couple meetings with the finance office with Daryl and Pam, and the implementation is underway. The contracts are being assembled, inventoried, and we've had discussions about implementation of this statement. Another item I want to bring to your attention is that when you see the auditor's report in the current year, the format is going to change based on the statement of auditing standards number 134. Opinion paragraph is going to be the first paragraph, so as opposed to you always saw it as the first paragraph on the second page. So the auditor's report will start with the opinion paragraph first, will be followed by basis of opinion paragraph, and then are going to be several bullet points to explain auditor's responsibilities. So that section is expanded. If in the past was just one paragraph explaining high level what the auditor's responsibilities were, now the auditor's responsibilities are going to be reported in bullet points, so it is clear what our responsibilities are. And those responsibilities are similar to what I mentioned in the first few slides of this presentation. Next, please. As I mentioned before, at the end of the audit, we are going to have another formal communication, and our report is going to include the items that are listed on this slide. So we'll communicate to you significant accounting policies and where they can be found in the financial report, adoption of any new accounting principles, so which in this year is going to be GASB 87 leases. If there are any management judgments or any sensitive accounting estimates. We are going to report to you any significant audit adjustments that could be recorded or unrecorded. We haven't had any of those in the past, but we are required to say even if there are none. We are going to report if there are any disagreements with management or any difficulties encountered, any irregularities of illegal acts, any consultations that we might be aware of management with other auditors, and if there are any matters that are related to impairment of our independence. And one report that will be issued is the report on internal controls. So if there are any material weakness, significant deficiencies, or other deficiencies, that will be reported on that report. Otherwise, the report will be clean. Next slide, please. In this slide is the engagement timing. We are going to start our final field work on last week of August 29th. The plan for now is that the draft of the financial statements will be ready for review at the end of September 30th, and expected client approval of draft statements on sometime mid October, so October 17th, with a planned issuance of financial statements on October 31st. And if there are any comments to be recorded or reported, they'll be included in a management letter that will be issued at the same time as the financial statement. So during this time, we issue not just the financial statements, but we issue the programmatic audit, and we'll be issuing the federal single audit also. In the next slide, I have listed our contact information. So that's my contact information, email, and phone number, and David's contact information for email and phone number. And please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that are audit related. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Nicolette. If there's no questions from our committee members, we could move on with thanks for all of this great feedback and overview. It's helpful for us to understand where we can engage and what the timelines are to be most informative to your work. So I thank you for that. And I thank Daryl for bringing you in as a guest speaker today.
Thank you.
So Claudio again, and I'll turn it over this time to Susan Rich-Bai to talk about the 2021 state-based marketplace annual reporting tool, SMART.
Thank you, Claudio. Yes, otherwise known as the SMART. Under the ACA, state-based marketplaces such as Access Health are required to keep accurate accounting of all activities, receipts, and expenditures, and to monitor and report to Health and Human Services on our exchange-related activities, and to complete an annual report and engage an independent auditor, CLNA, to perform annual independent financial and programmatic audits to ensure compliance with regulations and standards. So back in 2015, CMS developed an online tool for exchanges to use for all of these responsibilities, to put all of the requirements into one place. And that is known as Claudio said, the State-Based Marketplace Annual Reporting Tool, affectionately known as the SMART. The SMART has 4 components: eligibility and enrollment, financial and programmatic audits, which CLNA is performing, program integrity, and then finally attestations of completion. So the SMART is due on June 1st of each year for the prior year, and Access Health filed its SMART for 2021 on May 31st, and we anticipate hearing back from CMS in a few months. We did not find any issues when completing our responses and do not anticipate any recommendations or findings on this audit. And that is the update if anyone has any questions.
So, Susan, can you brief the committee very quickly the history of us and SMART in terms of, have we ever had any issues? And if so, what were they?
We've had just a few minor issues, James. I remember a few years back, we had been doing the Navigator program in a slightly different way for a few years. So we did have a recommendation on that. So we did change how we were doing that. And I think we also, like several other exchanges, did have a recommendation about sampling that is required under the ACA about verifying employer-sponsored insurance. There is a requirement in the ACA for exchanges to conduct random sampling. So we have done that for a few years, and actually CMS put a temporary hold on that. They're studying that, and they found it not to be very effective in getting information back. So they've actually put a hold on that. And right now, as of this year's notice of benefit and payment parameters, they've changed it up, and exchanges are not required to do the sampling going forward. And we are to come up with our own recommendation and plan for our exchange, for, you know, looking at our population and what we think works best. The FFM is just going to accept the consumer attestation regarding employer-sponsored coverage. And we actually have been pretty robust in this area from the beginning, we may have been one of the only exchange who's been sending the employer notice about an employee coming on and getting a tax credit through the exchange since the beginning of time. I know the FFM did not do that at the beginning, and some other exchanges may not have been. We always were doing that. So employers were always put on notice that their employee who the employer may have offered affordable minimum value coverage to had come on the exchange and answered questions in a way and was receiving a tax credit, which is, the consumer wouldn't be eligible for. And if in that instance, if the employer wasn't meeting their responsibility, the employer could be liable for the employer mandate penalty. And then for several years, sorry, James, you were on mute. For several years, we actually were also doing employer appeals here at Access Health. We've since turned them over to the FFM, which all states have them now done by the FFM. But we do get, employer appeals that come in, which is a good example of showing that the process does work with the notice and the employer appeal. So if there are instances where, someone is getting a tax credit that they should not be getting, or the employer maybe isn't meeting their obligation, that does come out as part of the employer appeal process.
So Susan, with respect to the smart reporting, last year we didn't have any issues. The year before,
We did. We have not.
The issues you're talking about, the minor ones, those go back several years.
Yes, exactly, James. Yes, so we've had very clean smarts without any recommendations, and those were minor ones, and they were ones, especially with the sampling, that all of the exchanges, got during that year.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
This is Claudio. I have two questions. One on the good question that was just asked. I want to piggyback. Apart from Connecticut's smart tool, our reporting, and any small minor issues that have happened in the past, from a nationwide perspective, what tend to be the bigger flags or problems? Not in Connecticut, but across all state-based. Is there any sort of handful that stick out that CMS flags?
Susan, do you have any insight on that at all?
I don't have any particular insight, Claudio. I mean, there may have, exchanges may do verifications and some things in different ways over the years, so some of that may vary from state to state. And like I said, the sampling was something that was brought up for several exchanges, but I don't know that there have been any big issues across the board.
So Claudio, we could follow up on that, but I'm sure if there was something big as you are in the context of the question you asked, we probably would have been made aware of it through our state-based marketplace organizations that we're part of, so that we all could be on the lookout and make adjustments. But the one area we know that every state have different policies on is verifications.
Yeah.
That's the one area that I would think there'd be some concerns there. Mm-hmm. But again, I want to stress, at the risk of sounding self-serving, we are one of the better states in terms of verifying people's legitimacy to get the APTCs that they're entitled to. Because if we don't do it, when they have to reconcile with their taxes, then they are on the hook for any big money. So we try to do our best upfront to keep them informed as to coming up giving us information so we could update the records so that the amount of tax rate they're getting is as accurate as possible. But some other states don't. I don't know. I think California, they don't do that at all.
Right. That's very helpful, James. And yes, I do think this is an area of distinction for Access Health CT, and I was just trying to quantify, because compared to those very minor issues that happened way in the past in Connecticut, I bet you other states may have some more moderate level issues that they're dealing with. So just to put it in context, I do think it's a point of distinction for us that we should be proud of. One last question, Susan, if you may be able to answer this or not. Are these smart tools available, and are there any value in looking at what other states do from eligibility and enrollment through them for policy development. I'm asking for my own purposes, is this a useful way to get a snapshot of some best practices if we ever wanted to think about things, or are they, one, not accessible, or two, not very useful to the layperson?
I don't know that they're accessible to, to each other. We file them through a system. Pam has her special credentials to file our SMART through CMS through a separate system. But as James mentioned, we have several different avenues, both through NASHB, who we've mentioned, the National Academy of State Health Policy, our very active state exchange group, and also through CMS, and SOCIO that heads the exchanges. We have several different groups and the CEOs have several meetings. There's a lot of collaboration and a lot of sharing and monthly meetings that go on all different topics. There is a forum on eligibility on enrollment, for an example. So there is a lot of sharing between all of the exchanges of challenges we may have and how we implement new requirements and things that come up.
And Claudia, it's a very collaborative group because we are all one solid organization trying to how do we help each other improve what we do, and also we look out for each other, and if something comes up through Connecticut, we share it with the other exchanges, and they do likewise with us. And I think I mentioned at the last board meeting, we all attended a conference last month in DC, and it was well attended, and there's a lot of ideas and that was shared among us. And again, at the risk of sounding self-serving again, we kind of led the discussion in terms of stuff that we're doing that's innovative. There are a lot of states are looking to us. Our broker academy is one of them, and the employee engagement that we have in place. They want to know what is it that we're doing that's helping us to become one of the better state exchanges in the country.
Very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions from committee members before we wrap up this section?
No.
Seeing none, the last item is a motion to adjourn today's meeting, which I'll entertain now.
Move to adjourn. This is Grant.
Grant moves.
Second, CC Woods.
CC seconds. All those in favor?
Mr. Chair, we have to do a roll call.
Roll call.
Oh, we're going to do a roll call? Okay, so we will do a roll call on
Claudia Galtieri,
Yes.
Grant Ritter,
Yes.
CC Woods,
Yes.
Early Zametti,
Yes.
Matthew Brackman. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.